The final piece of the puzzle is the CSS transitions and transform declarations that will give our gallery its pizzazz. I have opened now the transitions.css file from the chapter 5 0504 underscore CSS folder. And first, since we're working with 3D transforms, we need to establish the perspective in the outer wrapper, which in this case is the section tag with the class of container. So I'll start right after my last declaration margin here and put in WebKit perspective. And let's set that to 1,000. All right, we can copy this. And I'm going to paste this in 4 times now. And then change our vendor prefixes. First, let's change the second entry from WebKit to Moz for Mozilla. The third one we'll change to MS for Microsoft. And then we'll change the fourth one to O for Opera. And we'll get rid of the last one altogether. Now we're ready to pass the 3D features onto the children of the container. And for that, we'll need to set the transform style property to preserve 3D for its containing element, which is the div with an ID of carousel. I'll go after position absolute here and enter in the WebKit -transform style. And we want this to be set to preserve 3D. I'll copy the line. And again, let's paste it in 4 times and change our vendor prefixes. All right. Let's set up our transitions next, but only if the JavaScript is up and running. So we want to target the carousel and the figure tag within the ready class. So I'm going to put that down at the bottom here and create a new rule. So .ready space #carousel, comma, and we'll enter in the second selector. Again, .ready, #carousel, figure. All right. Now we're going to transition the transform property, and of course we'll use our vendor prefixes, and we have to make sure that the vendor prefix is the same for both the transition and the transform property. So let's start off with -webkit, -transition, and then -webkit again, transform. And let's make this a 1-second duration, and we'll use the default for the timing functions, which is ease, by leaving that off. Okay, I'm ready to copy this line, and then again paste it 4 times, and let's change the vendor prefixes, being sure to change both the transition and the transform. All right, that's done. Now, this next bit is a design choice, and it's a bit subtle, but I prefer to set up a zeroed out box shadow property that can grow with the transition on the images. Let me show you what I mean. We'll create a new rule for the images within the figures that are within carousel. So let's enter in our box shadow property with the WebKit vendor prefix. And instead of setting up an offset and a spread, we'll just use zeros, 0 space, 0 space, 0 space, and then the color, which I'm going to keep consistent, but you won't be able to see it because all the other values are at 0. Okay, we can copy that line now, and then again, paste it 4 times, and change our vendor prefixes. Next, let's add in our transition for the image, and rather than target one property, because we have multiple things going on now, let's use the keyword all, and we'll set the duration for the transition to 1 second. Time to copy that line, and then paste it in 4 times. Change our vendor prefixes. Okay, we're getting close to the end. It's time to create the CSS rule for the image hover state that will scale up the image to twice its size and apply the box shadow. We'll create the rule so that it only works on the frontmost image. That is the one with the class of showFig. The selector is #carousel space figure dot showFig image or img : hover. And let's start with the box shadow first, and we'll set the offsets to 3 pixels in both directions, and we'll have it spread out 5 pixels, and the color will be black. All right, we can copy that code line, do our pasting, and our vendor prefix substitution. Now we're ready to enter in our transform scale property. So WebKit, transform, scale, parentheses, and we're going to double the size of this, so enter in a 2 and a semicolon at the end. And we copy this and paste again 4 times. I assure you, I am just as sick of changing these things as you are, no doubt. Won't it be glorious when we get to the point where this will no longer be necessary? I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are too. All right, finally, let's set up a couple of rules that we'll need for the older browsers, ones that do not support CSS 3D transforms. Here, we'll incorporate the modernizer class No CSS Transforms 3D to hide what we don't want to show and only display that which we do. So the rule for here starts with the selector .no hyphen and then the property that is not supported by those browsers, which in this case is CSS Transforms 3D. And then pound carousel, figure. All right, let's do that one more time and apply it to just the toggle switch. So we can hide that toggle control. And I mentioned this would be a hide, so we'll use the display property and set it to none. All right, so the last thing we want to do is when we're ready to show the figure, we'll change the display none to display block. And we'll only apply that for a figure with a class of show fig. So let's enter in our No CSS Transforms 3D value again. I had just copied it, so I'll paste it again one more time. Pound carousel, figure dot show fig. Let's open and close our curly braces and enter in display block. All right, let's save our file. Now, there's one more thing I need to do before we preview this in the browser, and that's to link the CSS file, transitions.css, to our source code. So let's go up to open that file, which is spotlight.htm in the Chapter 5 0504 folder. And we'll put this right after the link to main.css. So another link tag with an href equal to underscore CSS. And there's our helpful CSS folder pop-up. Put a folding slash, and you can see one of two files there. We want transitions.css. So I'll select that and then enter in the rest of the code. Rel equals style sheet and media equals screen, comma projection, just to be consistent. All right, we close off our link tag, save it, and now everything's done. Let's head on over to the browser. Now what you see before you is what happens before I refresh the page. This is with all the raw HTML in it, but before the CSS and JavaScript has been integrated. So let me click reload, and there's our carousel. I hover over the first image, pops open nicely. See how the box shadow fades in and then fades out again? And let's go previous this time just to check it out this way. Looks excellent. I really like this one here, so let's take a closer look at that. It's very nice. Now let's try out our toggle access. Very sweet and interesting. And now we go next. And there's another image scaled up for you to examine. Well, it's working fine in Safari, a very modern browser. Let's take a look at a slightly older version of Firefox. Now when I load it into Firefox, I'll scroll down to the middle, and there we see the basic image. If I hover over it, it does scale up because this version of Firefox does support that sort of scaling and transitions. And as you can see, it's just as smooth as in Safari. And now when I click Next, I can cycle through the images very easily, and it all works perfectly well. You'll notice that also the toggle access button is now hidden in the upper right. All right, so excellent work. Let's head back to the Safari for one last look at our 3D carousel. That's up and running, complete with hover scaling, rotating axes, and graceful degradation. Great work, everybody.